Jones from the Daily Politicus USA. Sarah, good morning, and thanks for being with us, but also thanks for hanging a little bit loose so we could get Stacey in for a little bit longer this morning.
Good morning. Oh, it was my pleasure.
Yeah, she's great. I mean, I'm not familiar with how familiar you are with Chicago and Illinois politics, but we've got some big names here that have made obviously national news with our governor and J.P. Pritzker, and of course Mayor Brandon Johnson here in Chicago, and other officials here that have really been fighting the good fight, and she's one of them. CTU president, Chicago Teachers Union president, and Illinois Federation of Teachers executive vice president. So she's one of those voices, kind of like you, that says we've got to do whatever we got to do to win this fight. And in the cases of financing and economics, she's a stalwart when it comes to we do have to tax the rich unapologetically. And why are we waiting so long? So that's who she was, who she is. And thank you for being patient and letting us kind of squeeze in a little bit more time since we were running a little bit behind.
Oh, absolutely. No worries.
So to that end, I got to ask you this question as it relates to what she said. And I didn't even have this in my notes until early this morning. But, Mitt Romney comes out and says, yeah, we got to tax the rich. And I don't know if you saw that or not. But even now, he's probably known it for a long time. He's just kind of, stood in the void so that it wasn't something that he had to sign on to. But yeah, he's even saying now that the rich should be taxed to fix the problems that we have when it comes to our debt in this country. What are your thoughts about that, Sarah?
Well, it's interesting that he waited until he could no longer impact policy and law to say that.
Yep.
When that's been obvious for decades as the tax laws have been changed and whittled away over and over again to put the burden on the middle and lower classes to pay all of the taxes that the rich and that companies don't pay, big business. And he's always been somebody who represented big business. So I'm glad that he's saying this now, but I also note just how long it takes people to come out and say, I think we should be asking who else also knows that that's the only way to fix the problems that we face right now in this country. And they won't speak up because they can make policy. And instead they're choosing to bend the knee to the wealthy and those people who, may be contributing to their campaigns and may be lobbying them in the dark, and we don't know about it. So a lot of questions always come up for me when people who have stood for the opposite come forward now.
Yeah, I know. It kind of, when you hear that, what Stacey was talking about, when you hear that, you do ask the question, so where you been? And you knew, so there's a part that you go, well, yeah, you're right, but we were telling you that. You didn't just come out with this. We've been telling you this for X number of years. And that's why, even though I highlight that Mitt Romney says this, I highlight it to point out the fact that people have known, in his role, have known this for forever. But their goal was never to really fight for the American people, quote unquote, John Boehner. It was to fight for their donors and their consolidation of power and resources. It was never about making sure that everybody else benefited. And so that's where we are. And here in Chicago, we're seeing that be exposed because even some Democrats that are part of the city council are faced with the reality that your donors mean more to you than the citizens of the city of Chicago and the county and the state at large. And it's a national problem. It's not just happening here in Chicago.
Well, I think that it really does. This is the story, and it's told. There's corruption here in the little township where I live. There's corruption in every government all around, and that's why we have to be active as citizens and be, go to the town hall, go to the city meetings, because this stuff is always happening. And I think the other thing is, the people that are in office, that are in Congress, that are in, like, we look at we look at what's happening nationally often and don't look at what's happening locally. But of course, locally is where we're breeding this corruption. And then those people, when they are successful locally, they can get onto the larger stage and do even more damage. The larger question is, why is it that this dark money and these lobbyists and these people who are special interests, why are they getting catered to? And then we look at the election laws and we look at the Supreme Court, and that's where a lot of this stuff really took a dark turn. With Citizens United and other issues like that. So I think it's really important to people. What I always say, because when you can get into, and people will get into arguments about rhetoric, and they will talk about what they think their party stands for. And I always tell people, don't listen to what they're telling you. Go and look at their votes.
Yep.
That's the story. And so the votes will show you. So why did they vote that they don't want the Disclose Act to be passed? Why did they vote against the Stock Act, right? So, like, these are the stories. That is the truth. And sometimes those stories can be spun because they'll make something that is a disguise kind of. They'll talk about some bill and let them vote on something that they know isn't going to pass, so they can claim that they voted on this thing. But there's always the story of the vote where they voted no on disclosing the truth about who's lobbying them and who's paying them and how they're making their money.
It's interesting. Right? It's interesting, Sarah, that you said that, because so I look at the way in which you talk about the voting, and I'll overlay this with the Marjorie Taylor Greene situation. Okay, I've said I've not bought into any of it. No matter what she's saying now, however she's saying what she's saying about anything, period, is how did she vote when it really mattered? And even with Mitt Romney, and even though, like I said, I knew I was highlighting, he said something that we've all known for a long time. In this case, this is, sort of merging local with national. But Mitt, how did you vote? I mean, in some cases, he did vote against certain things, but at the end of the day, the majority of his votes were to further keeping taxes in a way that benefited the wealthier parts of our society. And I don't just say millionaires and billionaires, but because there's a lot of people that are not in that pool of voting politicians, but they're benefiting from what those politicians are doing. And Mitt Romney was the same guy that said, corporations are people. And when we were talking about Citizens United a few years back. And so it is how they vote. That is the action. And I appreciate you reminding us of that, Sarah. Good point. Absolutely good point.
Because, it's easy, and we see the Epstein files and the way they're being discussed right now by the Trump administration versus what they're doing. That's another great example that you have to look at what people are doing. And this applies to personal lives as well. But, of course, all politics is personal in reality. And so you have to look at what people are doing, not what they're saying to you. Do they show up? How are they voting? What Donald Trump ran on releasing the Epstein files and then got into office, and all he has done is obstruct their full release, even in the face of a new law that was passed and even in the face of a subpoena. So that what he stands for is hiding this information from the American people, from the entire world, actually. He's hiding and obstructing the full release of this information. That is not what he's saying. What they say is, you're trying to protect victims. That is a lie. And so that's rhetoric. And then we look at their actions. Their actions are the exact opposite. And that is, I do want to say that this is a theme with this administration that I think is very difficult for people to tolerate. People know they're being lied to, and they know they're being gaslit every day. And this is really that whole, the big lie approach to seizing power. And one thing that does, when you tell a big lie that's so big that people say, oh, there's no way that would be a lie, a lot of people know, like, they feel that something is off. They might not have all the information, but they do feel something is off. And I think that in itself is so toxic. We can't really understand how detrimental that is to democracy and to people's mental health and their well-being. And I'm talking about everyone that hears this stuff, even in the background, and they know that something is wrong, something is not real, and something is a lie.
Yeah.
And we're all living under that.
That deception, but also that reality. I refer to it sort of as a political PTSD that we're all we're living under, and it's kind of one of the reasons why I talked about earlier in the show what people are going to be doing during the holiday this next week, 2 weeks time to navigate those treacherous waters. Sarah, let's take a quick break. We're going to come back, chat with you a little bit more, and then we will get. We'll get you out of here because we know you got a busy morning. 773. But let me ask you about. You talked about corruption. You talked about how that is, it's such a huge problem right now, and it's happening in so many different spaces. And right now, in front of our very eyes, the horrible tragedy of women, girls being victimized and becoming now survivors of these horrible folks is being propped up once again by the Justice Department, and Pam Bondi is standing in the way of justice being done. You wrote a great article. Inherent contempt charges are being prepared against Attorney General Pam Bondi. Let's talk about that. Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie said yesterday that they've got something to say about that.
Yeah, this hasn't been used, just to put this in context, since the 1930s. The Trump administration is so corrupt, and they are flouting the law to such a degree that this is now what is going to be required to get in hopes of getting them to comply. I think it's fair to say that they won't be complying with the law, and we are sort of looking at Pam Bondi is probably going to go down for this cover-up. And I also think it's interesting that she was the Attorney General in Florida as well during some of this when it was being covered up in Florida. So there's a lot of interesting connections that probably could be investigated and that might exist there as well. But we have a government right now that is actively violating the law. And one of the things I think people need to understand that really was like a gut punch to me when I heard it was that the New York Times did some extensive reporting on the Epstein-Trump relationship. And one of the reporters said that in making phone calls and reaching out to people, including victims, they have never encountered this level of fear where people won't even pick up the phone. They are afraid of the president's supporters, and the victims, many of them say they have been targeted with death threats. And so we have a system right now that is in place where there's like this stochastic terrorism effect, where people are so afraid to say anything they know is going to upset this president. Now, why is it that people know that talking about their experience of being sex trafficked or being raped or being abused is going to upset this president? Why is that? Why are his supporters, why do they know that they should threaten people into not talking?
Yep.
I think that right there is the one of the, I would say, the theme of how we got here, and this kind of like mob violence that's being aimed at, and it's being aimed at these victims, but we saw this against voters. We've seen this against cities with predominantly a black majority of voters every election. This has been going on, this threatening of people and silencing of people by his supporters. And so while we see lawmakers trying to hold Donald Trump and his administration accountable. What is happening here on the ground?
Yeah.
Why are these people that are out here in the streets terrorizing innocent victims? Why are they not being held accountable? You know, why are the people that issued those bomb threats to the voting areas? Why weren't they held accountable? It's stunning to me the level that these people are, the sort of privilege they've been given to act however they want to.
Well, this is one of those things, Sarah, and I've said this or versions of it before. This is where the crap is rolling downhill at an incredibly fast pace, so much so that people can't even stand up to fight in some ways against it. But I mean, obviously, that doesn't mean that we don't fight. It just means that it's coming at folks at such a pace and such a rate right now. And to your question about how these people are getting away with it, or they're not being held accountable, I mean, that's the plan. It's to shove as much down so that people lose their faith in not just the government, but in systems in general, to a point where they don't want to stand up to do anything. And I say don't want that. I don't mean that in a negative way, but they're just tired. I get that. I understand that. And trust me, when I hear people say that, Richard, I'm doing everything I can. I know what they're saying. I know what they're feeling, because they're seeing it in terms of how people are getting away with things, to your point. And they're feeling it when it comes to how this federal government is applying financial pressure in a way that's removing the incentive for people to be excited, to be happy. It's a two-pronged approach that in some factions or places in the country it's working. But I won't say sadly. I guess in terms of just in broader information, I think that the more we push our side of the table, our leaders, to recognize that there is a wind out there that says that we can fix this. And I'm not trying to be pie in the sky here. I'm just saying the more that we push our elected officials that are on the left, that hopefully are doing the right thing and have the right mindset and the right plan, we will be able to offset some of this. But unfortunately, and this is the sad part, it is going to take some time.
I do want to remind people, because I think your point, I worry about this constantly, the way that all of this is working, and it is intended to work to depress people and to kill their morale so they don't stay engaged. That's exactly the point. Who have we not seen in these Epstein dumps? President Obama and President Biden, and when the photographer that took the photos of the Trump administration that revealed their true characters, his photos of Obama and Biden are very revelatory. And the photo of Biden was such a hopeful photo of a president who really stood for American values. And I think we need to remember all of the work that those two presidents did to help the American people. It is possible. And I would say that President Biden did so much for people that people aren't even aware of, like that whole thing about how he was making it a law so that you could kill a subscription. You know how like the gym subscription, all these, and you have to be on the phone for hours. He was passing this law, so like is the way you sign up for it is the way you kill the subscription.
Right.
So if it took you one click, then you get one click to kill. That might have sound small. Nobody really cared at the time, but to me, that is a huge impact on our lives, and it hits our wallets. So it is possible to have a good president, and it is possible. There are good people. They're not everywhere, but just like in our personal lives, how you have to look to find good people. The same thing is true with lawmakers, and the same thing is true with presidents. But they do exist, and they are out there, and it is our job to have higher standards and to say we are not going to tolerate this absolute corruption that Donald Trump represents. And he is the opportunity for all of us to say, finally, we've had enough.
That right there is probably that's such a strong point. if there's anything that he has done and his cronies and all the rest have done is hopefully waken brought enough people to the moment to say this is enough, and now is the time that I have to step up and I have to fight. Sarah, always great to have you with us. This is the last time we're going to have you on before we get into the new year. So I want to wrap up and thank you again for being patient this morning so that we could get President Gates on. But what are your quick thoughts for our listeners as we head through the end of this year and into 2026?
Well, I think 2026 is really going to be a very interesting ride. And I know that this is like a white knuckle roller coaster ride. But I think a lot of things are going to come out in 2026. And we have elections coming up that are really going to, I think, tell a story that a lot of people don't want to hear, but it will be impossible to ignore, and be that force in these people's lives, be the force that they can't ignore. That's what I would say for everyone to carry that into 2026. I know you're exhausted, and I know this is upsetting, but all of that stuff, all of the emotions and the exhaustion is, we have control over that. We can take this holiday time and recharge ourselves and come back and say, you will not hide from us. We will be here at every turn. You cannot get away with this while we are paying attention.
Yeah, that's a great message, Sarah.